/AskReddit. Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? When I was a young boy, probably 12 or 13, my dad and I took a spontaneous vacation to Duluth, MN. Since I'd never been there, I'd honestly never been on vacation before. So I was so excited to experience being somewhere awesome just for the fun of it. We had decided before leaving that would save money by skipping the hotel and sleeping in the truck at a rest lot. He'd sleep on an air mattress in the back of the truck with the topper, and I would sleep in the cab. We found a rest stop in town and went to sleep. At one point in the middle of the night I had to use the restroom, so I left the cab and used the men's room at the rest stop. There was one other guy in there using a urinal. The best word I can use to describe him was soggy. He looked like a mess. I'm pee shy, so I just stood at a different urinal for a few seconds and promptly left. He was blatantly watching me the whole time. I get about halfway to the truck when I see he's following me. I begin to run and so does he. I manage to barely get into the truck on time to lock the door behind me, where he's now pulling on the handle. Breathing heavily, I begin to yell DAAAADDAAAD wake up, and he pops up from the back like a meerkat. The guy locks eyes with my dad and quickly makes a 180 into a minivan and they speed off. I've honestly never given it all that much thought since it happened. Probably just tried to repress it or something. Having typed it out, I'm kind of shaking a little. TLDR. 13-year-old me almost got kidnapped at a rest stop in the middle of the night. I live in Duluth. I'm so sorry to hear about your experience. There are definitely some sketchy people in some neighborhoods here. So glad you made it away safely. When I was in my 20s, I got home from a business trip in the middle of the day and was driving back to my office from the airport, which involved being on the interstate for 50 miles or so. This was in the 80s, and cell phones weren't a thing yet. An old car with two men inside starts following me. Then they pull up beside me. The man in the passenger seat tells me that one of my back wheels is about to come off the car. Okay, well, my car was fairly new and was running fine as far as I could tell. No handling problems, nothing. I remembered that an upcoming exit had a full service gas station with an attached mechanics shop. So I exited there, and the men in the other car followed me. I rolled up to the entrance to the mechanics shop, where I was sure there would be people around, and opened my window. Out walked this absolute mountain of a mechanic. I mean, he was over 6 feet tall and a good 275 pounds. I told him that the men in the car who followed me said my back wheel was about to come off, but I didn't think there was a problem. Anyway, giant mechanic man started ambling over to the car that had followed me, and they very quickly hauled us out of there and got back on the interstate. I wish I could have got their number plates. I didn't even think about how sketchy the whole situation was until it was over. I forget who, but there was a serial killer around that time who would try to use that trick and get women to pull over in order for him to help them. I think he'd then actually tamper with their tires to get them to crash or something. Glad you made it safely. My dad was a meth addict. He did lots of ducked up things, dropping me off at trap houses to have sleepovers with other coke babies, living in a house full of animal and hoarding. He sicked his pit bull on a black child. He was a real ducking character. One night he came looking for my mom and I at our place. Mom wasn't there. Grandma was babysitting me. I was sleeping in bed when somebody started to try and open my window. It was locked, but they kept jamming something into the bottom to try and force it open. At the same time, I heard the living room door being tried by somebody else. My grandma snuck into my room in her nightgown, apparently woken up by the same thing, and told me say nothing. Don't even whisper. We laid under my bed while a group of men shouted for my mom to come out, slammed their hands on the windows to try and break them, and jumped on my grandma's car. She called the police and barely whispered into the phone. Eventually the cops arrived and the men scattered. Long story short, my dad and his other meth head friends came to the house with guns and knives with every intention to kill me and my mother because she was going to get custody of me. If my mom wasn't so vigilant with locks, we had 3 different kinds on the front and back doors, we would have died. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother, but I would always stop her. I was 8, she was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part, but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the third time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry, I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. In the early 90s in SW, Detroit, I was mugged. I was about 21 at the time. The guy who mugged me was a kid who tutored me in Spanish. I was like, "Jose, you tutored me in Spanish and I went to your sister's quinceanera. Dude, I'll tell your mom." He then ran away. When I was 9 or so, I went to the bathroom in a restaurant that was in a mall, peed at the urinal, and a big mentally disabled guy was standing behind me when I turned around. He frightened me and said he wanted to show me something, and grabbed my wrists and tried to pull me into the stall. I pulled my arms but he would not let go. When I was 9, I thought he either wanted to show me a giant shit or hurt me in the stall. Just as he was pulling me across the stall threshold, he let go of one wrist to close the stall door. I kicked him pretty hard in the leg and pulled my other arm away and got free. Ran out to my family that was eating in the restaurant and sat down. I didn't say anything, but they all knew something happened because I was white in shock. And just then the guy was speed walking out of the bathroom, leaving the restaurant. My mom said, "What happened?" I just said that guy tried to pull me into the stall and my 70-year-old grandmother jumped up and chased him before I finished talking. They made it to the mall and just by chance there was an undercover mall security guy sitting outside the restaurant and tackled the guy cause my grandmother was yelling to get that guy. You can't end the story there. This isn't complete. What happened after he got caught? We went to the security office in the mall. I was in one room. The guy was in the other room next door. When the police showed up, the guy went ham. We could hear him smashing and punch the wall in the next room. I think he fought the police when they go in the room. I told the police officers what happened. The restaurant gave us our meal at no charge and a gift certificate for $150 I think for a being brave kid, and the mall security gave me a couple vending marking toys from the $1 vendor thing. We went home. Not sure what happened to the guy after that. I was 9. My mom handled that, I guess. Your grams was the bomb, chasing that child molester down. Grandmas are the best. I was 15 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and starting dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk. Called 911, had 12 stitches, double layer, and a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. I was out with a few friends, and with us was a girl that had just broken up with a psychopath. We didn't know he was a psychopath. We found out that night. We were just walking back home from a restaurant. It was about 1 a.m. and the guy came running out of nowhere. I don't know how he knew where and went to meet us. He ran to the girl, lifted her shirt up and stabbed her in the gut, literally splitting her belly open like a fish, and then ran off. This whole thing happened really quickly, so we were all in shock. The girl was holding her own intestines in her hands and she was so shocked that she didn't even seem scared, wasn't screaming or anything. She just stood there. We called an ambulance and they managed to somehow put everything back and sew her up. This happened about 3 years ago and she still has pretty serious problems with her digestive tract. Can't eat certain things and that kind of stuff. That image of her just standing in the middle of the pathway holding her own guts will remain stuck in my head forever. The guy got 13 years in jail BTW. Serious. I had a guy high on both meth and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside him doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he is behind me. I am being choked to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke but did nothing as the guy was choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a bong. So I chased the guy out of my house. There is easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut. Seriously. And he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part I was surprised about the most. I hit the guy on his scalp. There isn't much blood in a scalp compared to most the body, but my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy, the cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering and attempted murder. Not sure what he got convicted of, but he went to jail for 4 years.